Welcome to the Master My Balance podcast. Join your host, Melissa Boyle, as she explores aspects of life that influence your financial well-being and personal growth.
Welcome back to Master My Balance. This is part 2 of my chat with Muriel Walls. Last time we covered the practical money stuff after divorce, and today we're looking at what comes next. So new relationships, blended families, and how to protect everyone involved. We'll pick up from where we left off. We've chatted about when couple divorces and important things that they should do, but I suppose at some point in time, either party or both may enter a new relationship. So I'd like to kind of bring us down that avenue where we talk about what would happen where there's maybe somebody remarries. Because if they've gone through the legal process to separate assets and ensure that the children of that marriage are looked after, there's a lot to take account of when it comes to a new relationship, I think, isn't there?
Absolutely. And if I had a pound for every client who told me that they were never getting into another relationship and they were never going to marry again, I'd be a wealthy person. I mean, look, life goes on.
Yes.
And I think couples do, maybe as I get older, couples seem to separate, or they seem to sort of decide that, look, if this isn't working,
Mm.
they're better to go their separate ways. Whereas I suppose maybe my generations just said you made your bed and you lay it and
Yeah.
maybe they're separating in their 60s, maybe
Yes.
not having had a very happy marriage for a long time. So, I say to younger people, by that I mean anybody under 50 or 60, that look, life moves on. Life expectancy moves on. People can live now to be 90 and be fit and healthy, so that you're hopefully will find somebody else that you can share your life with.
Yeah.
But it's complicated, as that Meryl Streep film, I think,
Yeah.
had of its name. It is complicated.
Mm.
It's a sort of yours, mine, and ours. If there's
Mm.
children on both sides, it can work very well, but there can also be strains and tensions, and it often depends on what the age of the children. Older children can be quite judgmental, I think, about
Yeah.
their parents, and quite protective maybe of mom who's got a new boyfriend, or dad who's got a new girlfriend that
Yeah.
the son or daughter don't like. So it has to be all very sort of carefully sort of navigated.
Yeah.
Um, and I think older children can sort of wonder, is this new girlfriend of dad's a fortune hunter, or
That's
is
it. Mm.
mom's new boyfriend a bit of a, he's out to, get a nice home and, put his feet under the
Another
table
rug.
and
Yeah.
sort of have everything sort of laid on for him. So,
Mm.
those dynamics certainly happen. And unfortunately or fortunately, cohabitation isn't a legal free zone, Melissa, that people think, oh, well, we're not getting married, we're only living together.
Yeah.
Um, since 2010, we have a cohabitation code. So it was tagged on to the Civil Partnership Act of 2010, which got a lot of publicity at the time. But the cohabitation bit wasn't quite, didn't get the same sort of publicity. But if a couple live together in an intimate and committed relationship for 2 years and they have a child together, then they have certain legal responsibilities sort of foisted on each other, whether they want it or not. And if they don't have children together and they're together for 5 years or more, likewise, there are certain rights and responsibilities. So if we take the earlier, so two divorced couples get together, they're together for a couple of years, then they have a child, they're together for another, 5 or 6 years, and then that relationship breaks down. Well, the dependent cohabitant, who's often the woman, but it doesn't necessarily have to be,
Yeah.
can make a claim to say, look, I need support. I gave up my job.
Mm.
I need some, housing needs, property adjustment, or I need a part of the pension So the claims are not quite at the same level as a spouse would be able to claim. It's called a redress scheme, so that people won't literally be sort of without anything, but
Yeah.
it's but it's still still significant provision can be made for cohabitants. If you
Okay.
take an older couple, a scenario which is not unusual, so we take a couple in their 60s, they're both divorced. She sells her nice house and goes and lives in his maybe nicer house.
Mm.
But she does an extension and she, gets it A-rated, and she puts in landscapes the garden, and all her money from her house goes into
Yeah.
sprucing up his house. And then, 5 or 6 years later, or 7 or 8 years later, that whole relationship goes
Mm.
south. She can make a claim against
Okay.
him. But that scenario is not unusual, Melissa. And the one bit of advice I would give to any woman in that situation is, do not sell your house.
Yeah.
Rent it out, get an
Mm.
income, but it's your, you know, bolt hole if something happens in the relationship. Um, because otherwise you're going to possibly be homeless.
Yeah.
Because if you're at an older age, nobody's going to be able to get a mortgage, or there's no buyout situation. And it might be that, he doesn't want to sell the nice house that he's been living in for 40 or 50 years. And all of this can be reversed. I mean, it could be the woman has the nice house and he goes to live in it,
Mm.
and he sells his house, um, and then the relationship ends, and then he's got no place to go.
Yeah.
So all of these things need to be talked through. Now, the key thing about the cohabitation code that I need to say is that because the law imposes this on people, it does allow them also to sign a cohabitation agreement or a cohabitants agreement, which effectively allows the people to opt out of this scheme. So
Okay.
if an older couple are going to live together, and I would do
Mm.
this work regularly,
Yeah.
maybe because of my age group as well, couple going to live together, they sign a cohabitants agreement, say, look, what I have, a woman might say, look, what I got on my divorce, or my
Mm.
husband died, and I want
Yeah.
this to go to my children. I don't want it to go to my partner and maybe his children. And that's
Yeah.
absolutely understandable. Likewise, on his side, they might
Yeah.
say, look, this is my lifetime's work. Their mother is taken care of. I want it to go to my children. So that's a discussion that they need to have before
And that
they.
stands in law, because I'm
Absolutely.
thinking, you know how prenuptial agreements, they say they're not legal in Ireland, but that agreement is.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
okay.
Provided both parties have, it's in writing, and both
Yeah.
parties have got their own independent legal
Legal advice.
advice. Yeah.
Okay.
And just a little thing on the prenuptial agreements. It's an interesting area.
Yeah.
And I suppose a lot of people think of, prenuptial agreements as very American and for the rich and famous. Most of the prenuptial agreements I would do would be for couples of my age group, widowers,
Okay.
divorcees, people who've, had other relationships, and they're
Yeah.
going into this second relationship, both probably bringing something to it,
Mm.
maybe a house or some, and they want to make sure that most of that, not all of it,
Mm.
goes to their children. And
Yeah.
they set out in a prenuptial agreement what's to happen. And we haven't had a case on it, but I would say, and I would say to people, the chances of the courts adhering to that prenuptial agreement are much higher
Okay.
than, an agreement that somebody enters into when they're 25 or 26 years of age,
Yeah.
and they marry, because one, they're mature people, they understand what they're doing, they're
Mm.
going into a relationship late in life, um, and this they're, getting legal advice, and they're saying this is what we want to do.
Yeah.
And of course, if they're still together 10 years later or 15 years later and they want to change it, of
Mm.
course they're perfectly
Yeah.
entitled to do that. And it might be that the children, uh, because if they're sort of a bit upset about the relationship at the beginning, they might say, look, dad's as happy as a you know,
Mm. Yeah.
happy as a parrot, you know, this
Mm.
woman is the best thing that's happened to him since mum died or mum divorced
Yeah.
or something. And likewise on the other side.
Mm.
And they might be completely on board with, you know,
Because I think that's a big fear that a lot of people have that have been there, they've been married, they've divorced, and then they've built themselves back up and they have these assets. It would kind of, they like, I have heard it a few times where people are a bit cautious or a bit nervous about getting into another relationship and going through that all over again. So that is really good. Great to hear that there is some kind of safety net for both sides.
yeah, and look, I think and that fear is natural.
Mm.
And I suppose in a cohabiting, if you're together 5 years, I mean, if the relationship breaks down before the 5 years, then obviously there's no legal claim unless you've had the child together. So that gives you a reasonable period of time in which to know whether or not this is working. But it's all down to communication as well.
Yes.
Melissa. I
Yeah.
mean, I'm divorced and remarried myself, so
Mm.
um, I
It's having
understand
the
these.
open, isn't it? The open
Yeah,
and honest and not being afraid to have those open and honest conversations that, okay, these are things that we need to look at. Because I know if it was me, if I ever went down that road again, this is something that I would want to have to discuss basically and make sure that all areas are covered because once bitten, twice shy, I think, isn't it?
yeah, and it's not that it's not an all or nothing situation. It can
Yeah,
sort of say, look, this is the provision I want to make for you as my new spouse, but this is the
yeah,
provision I want to make for my children and my
yeah,
grandchildren. You know,
yeah.
and it's a balancing. It's a balance, because of course we haven't really talked much about the tax code,
Yes.
Melissa. But I suppose one of the things about cohabitation and cohabitants is that it doesn't get the same tax treatment as spouses do. So
Okay.
if I was in a cohabiting relationship and I wanted to give my new partner lots of money,
Mm.
that would be a gift for a gift tax point of view.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have to say. Whereas if I want to give money to my spouse, it's completely and utterly, you know, tax free.
And that's
And
the advantage of being married, I suppose, isn't it? That there
exactly.
is that tax advantage there.
Yeah, yeah. And maybe just going back to our sort of divorce scenario, one of the little things that can be important. There is a special tax relief called the single parent child carer tax credit. What a mouthful!
I
But
know.
it's effectively like another personal
Mm.
tax credit that will go to one parent, usually the parent who's the primary carer of the children. But again, in a separation or divorce, I'd be saying, well, what parent is to get that
Yeah.
allowance? Because it, it would often go to the mother, but if she doesn't have an income to
There's
use it
no
up,
point. Mm.
there's no point. We give it to the father. But a discussion does have to take place because it's it's a valuable um tax relief. And that, I suppose, would also tie into a conversation that you'd have to have at the time of separation. Are the couple continuing to save to be jointly assessed for tax, or are they going to go their separate ways? And
Okay.
I would usually recommend that they go back to being single people for tax purposes, because it's complicated if they continue with joint assessment. But there can be some advantages to doing it maybe for a period of years to just
Mm.
allow people to smooth out the wrinkles
Yeah,
and allow the wife maybe go back to work and get herself an income from
that's
which to
it.
use her tax allowances. Because if a husband goes back to single assessment, he doesn't get the benefit of the married person's
Yes.
allowances. So the tax can be tricky, and we'd usually have to do a couple of scenarios as to which is the best
Yeah.
option for the particular couple. But the taxman is always there in the background.
Yes. Yeah. Ready. And what about succession then? Because when it comes to succession, the rights, that's going to change as well once that divorce goes through, isn't it? So
Yes,
say
both
if,
separate. Yeah.
yeah, and then say if they are in a new relationship, then the cohabitant, that's still, there's no succession there if they're only cohabiting, that basically they would need to be married again, is it?
Yeah, it's tricky. So we'll just deal with the married people first. I
Mm.
mean, the one absolute right when you literally, if you walk down the aisle and you were, some awful tragedy happened as you were walking back up the aisle after you were married,
Yeah.
um, you have an entitlement to inherit part of the estate of the spouse. That's if you die intestate, that's without will. It can
Okay.
either be the whole estate if there are no
Mm.
children, or half the estate if there are children. And
Mm.
if you do make a will, the minimum legal right share that a spouse has is at 1/3.
Mm.
So whether you separate or you divorce, we would always be looking at those Succession Act rights. Are they being extinguished? Are they being, uh, cancelled? And if they are, is there something else in place? And that's where we would often look at a life policy.
And
The
do you
life
have a choice whether you distinguish them or not? Um,
Yes, in
okay.
separation, yes, you
Oh,
have.
yeah.
You have to have a particular order that those rights are extinguished.
Mhm.
Now, it would happen in 99% of cases that they are extinguished.
Yeah.
Um, but the court would often say, well, what's the security for the maintenance, or what's the substitution if they
Yeah.
are going to be extinguished? In divorce, they're automatically extinguished because you're no longer a spouse.
Yeah.
And once the divorce is granted, those rights are extinguished automatically. But the
Okay.
will isn't cancelled automatically, so you need to follow that up
Yeah.
with a new will. In cohabitation, there isn't any automatic entitlements to inherit. It would be up to the parties to decide. Look, if I die, I want you to stay living in the house for the rest of your life, or for a period of time, or I'm going to give you X, you know,
Mm.
hundreds of thousands, or whatever is appropriate in terms of the value of the estate. The the challenge there is that it's taxable.
Okay. Yes.
It's taxable, so the tax man gets his whack. Now,
Yeah.
there's a funny little sort of anomaly there, that if a cohabiting person made no provision for their lifelong partner, that partner can make a claim against the estate of the other person and say, look, I've been living with this man or woman for 20 years. This
Mhm.
is my home. I'm 75 years of age. I'm homeless. And the court could make some provision for that person, and it would
Okay.
not be taxable. So if the court decides to make provision in a scenario that they find to be deserving, there won't be tax. But if a person volunteers to take care of their partner,
Mm.
it is taxable. So it's
Yeah.
it's sort of counterintuitive, but I think what the government, or the revenue were trying to avoid, was people saying that they were in cohabiting relationships to paying paying tax.
Yeah. I understand. Um, with all like your years' experience and now in family law, what would be the common? Do you ever have people come back to you and say, or even people that not that you've worked with, or maybe people that have been through a divorce, have people come to you and said, I wish I'd have known, or if only somebody had told me that I should have done this. Is there any particular point that you think you hear over and over again that you think people should know?
Oh, goodness! I should have thought about that one,
Yeah.
Melissa. Well, I suppose one thing that's coming to me, whether it's is that they weren't maybe more prudent financially, uh,
Mm.
when they had a better time, that they
Yeah.
didn't maybe have a rainy day fund, or that they, for example, they might say, God, I think we spent X thousands on that holiday, and that X thousands would have now gone a long way to
Yes.
sorting out. Um, so, I mean, I think they
Difficult
probably,
one.
yeah, it's a difficult one. I mean, you have to live as well, I suppose.
Mm.
But I suppose I'm fascinated by people have different um have different lifestyles. I mean, eating out now just seems to be, just happens like regularly, like 2 and 3 times a week.
Yes.
I mean, that in my time, even when I was a parent, if we ate
Mm.
out for birthdays and special occasions, you were talking about maybe six or seven times a year.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, it
and
seems to be, it's so common now. And especially with younger, even my teenage sons would, they come in, they'd looking for money, they're going to their friends, they're going out. I can't think of the name of the place. They make all chicken, but all the teens love it anyway. But that's where they all go. And I'm thinking, you're going out for dinner, really?
your dinner's here on a plate.
Yeah, yeah. I just made it. It's on the counter, ready to eat. But yeah, it seems to be the thing now, especially with a lot of the younger generation, they do go out for food an awful lot. Now, I'd be guilty of, I would go out for coffees, but I think because I've such a lively household, if I want to read something or go over something, it's not happening in this home. Doesn't happen. And I need to go somewhere and I have a coffee shop that I go to and it's really nice and I can sit down, get a nice coffee and read what I want to read. So that
Mm,
would be my thing now with gold. I'd go out for coffee, but yeah, I'm n- like always. I hear it regularly that a lot of my sons and their friends they will be going out and they'd be going out for something to eat, and you think, wow, okay. I wonder how
well,
long your rainy day is going to last if you keep going that way as you age,
I,
as you get older.
I was listening to something on the radio about home cooking and
Mm.
diet and processed foods and everything else. And this person was saying young people like the same food in the same packaging and the same sort of, taste. And this other person was saying, look, there's a home cooked meal, a mother might put a home cooked meal, lovely, chicken and,
Mm. Yeah,
potato and nice veg and, all lovely and everything else. And she finds that like their teenager has um phone Just Eats to get some, Indian takeaway. And she's saying,
yes, yes. That is a
um,
regular occurrence, Muriel. In my home, I would walk in regularly and would see the lovely dinner that has been made and left out for them. And yeah, it's just
yeah,
they learn when it comes to the stage where they have to save for a mortgage or they want their own car. And they say, I think they will kind of come around then and realize, oh my God, I can't believe I blew all that money on
yeah,
buying myself a Chinese, like, every second night or
yeah,
whatever. But
yeah.
yeah, we'll wait and see.
Can I just say something about grandparents?
Yes.
I mean, there are, I think, a lot of grandparents who want to help their grandchildren, and
Mm,
sometimes they help with school fees and that.
yeah.
But and it's not that I'm a mean grandparent, but I think that like if you were giving, a grandchild €50 for their birthday,
Yeah.
like think about giving them €20 and putting €30 into, a little savings account. Um, or, if they're visiting and it's always €50, there's
Yeah.
lots of things I think could do because if it's even €30 a month, after 10 years that would be,
It would
a
add up.
nice tidy sum of money to give
Mm,
to a young person as they were starting out in college life or an apprenticeship or
yeah.
go towards their first car or whatever. So I think having a even a family discussion about because I mean I know some parents would say, Mum, don't be giving them €50 because they'll
Yeah.
only just blow it on
They
some
blow it. And
rubbish.
it's funny that you've said that. When my children were younger, every time somebody gave them, whether it be confirmation, communion, or birthday, if they got money, I always took a chunk of it and I put it in the bank or put it into their savings account. And my kids were like, "Yeah, mom, put it in the savings." Sure, mom. And I used to laugh at them, and I'm like, it is. I've put it in your savings. It's there. And it was only my eldest son then, he hit a certain age where it goes into his name only. And I gave him his, the book. It was for his credit union. And he was like, oh my God. I was like, what? He goes, you actually did put the money. I said, yeah, I told you I was putting it in savings. I didn't
Yeah,
explain credit union at the time because I thought
yeah,
bank, they'll understand as they're growing up. Your money
yeah,
goes in the bank. But they thought this was such a bad thing that I was taking their money and putting it in the bank. And it was
yeah,
only then when I handed it back to him then when he got to a certain age, he was so taken aback. And, he was like, oh my God, I can't believe you did that. You were actually, but that's what I told you. He goes, yeah, but we just thought you were just really just saying that, ma'am. We didn't think it was actually going into a bank account somewhere.
yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah, it's like children don't understand sometimes when you're because I said it to my youngest when he'd made his communion. I said, okay, take that now, put that into your savings. And he just couldn't get to grips with this, even though I had been putting money into savings. I was like, yeah, but it's still yours. It just goes in and then it's safe then in there if you want to buy something when you hit teenage years and the money's there. And he's like, but it's safe with me. I'll mind it myself. And I was like, well, okay, but still it's good to put it in, but
yeah,
it's only
yeah,
when they get older, I think they value that,
yeah,
and it just means so much more to them and they understand that bit more, I think,
yeah.
as they get older. But Muriel, that was absolutely a fantastic chat. I love talking to you, and I really hope you come back on again, because what we didn't get to talk about is the collaborative process, and that's something that deserves a podcast interview in itself, because I think it is fantastic and really is the way to go. So yeah, I would love to have you back on and to discuss that in full detail so all our listeners can learn all about it and what it entails. But yeah, so have you anything you'd like to add in before we finish up?
Uh, not really. I think we've had a very good chat, and I've
Well,
enjoyed
yeah,
it. And I'd certainly collaborative practice. I brought it to Ireland about 20 years ago, and I'm passionate about it because I do think people want to try to divorce and separate in a better way than maybe the previous generations. I find now, people say my parents separated, or aunts and uncles
mm,
or friends,
yeah.
and they want to do it better. And they know that other resources are out there for them. So certainly happy to come back and talk about that.
Yeah, I'd love it. And for our listeners, I will be putting Muriel's details up in the show notes of the podcast. I will also I'll put up our website, murielwalls.ie. There's a link there and it explains all about collaborative practice as well, just to give you a little bit of an insight for what we will be talking about the next time. So, Muriel, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I look forward to chatting to you again.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Master My Balance. If you liked what you heard, then be sure to hit like and subscribe. And why not share with like-minded people? Until next time, you can follow us on all socials at Master My Balance. And we'll see you next time.